The stars looked wrong. Captain Daniel Harper stood at the observation deck of the Resolute Dawn and knew immediately that something had changed. The familiar patterns he had memorized since childhood were gone. In their place hung strange constellations that no human eye had ever seen before. "Sir, we have a problem," said Commander Catherine Monroe from behind him. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the tension beneath it. "Navigation cannot find a single reference point. We are not where we are supposed to be." Daniel turned to face his second-in-command. She was holding a data tablet, and her knuckles were white from gripping it too hard. He gave her a small nod and walked toward the bridge. The hallways of the ship felt different now, though nothing had physically changed. It was the silence. The crew members he passed all wore the same expression of quiet confusion. The bridge was busy when he arrived. Chief Engineer Samuel Price was arguing with a junior officer about the engine readings. Dr. Christina Walsh stood near the science station, her eyes fixed on streams of data that made no sense. Everyone stopped when the captain entered. "Report," Daniel said calmly. Samuel stepped forward first. "Captain, about 20 minutes ago, we passed through some kind of spatial distortion. It happened so fast that we barely registered it. One moment we were in mapped space. The next moment, we were here. Wherever here is." Christina added her findings. "The star patterns do not match anything in our database. Neither do the background radiation signatures. Captain, I do not think we are in our galaxy anymore, or if we are very far from home." Daniel absorbed this information without changing his expression. He had trained for unexpected situations his entire career. Panic helped no one. Fear solved nothing. He looked at his crew and saw that they were watching him, waiting for his reaction. He gave them what they needed. "Calm. Then we figure out where we are and how to get back," he said simply. "Samuel, keep the engines stable. Christina, continue your analysis. Catherine, try to establish contact with anyone who might be out there." They had barely begun their work when the sensors screamed a warning. Derek Collins, the security chief, was the first to read the data. His face went pale. "Captain, we have contacts." "Many contacts." "Warships, sir. At least 40 of them. And they are surrounding us." The main view screen flickered to life, and Daniel saw them. The alien vessels were unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. They were massive, dark, and covered in patterns that seemed to shift and move like living things. Each ship was at least 10 times the size of the Resolute Dawn. "They are scanning us," Catherine reported. "Very thoroughly. They are inside our systems, our databases, everything." Daniel nodded. "Let them look. We have nothing to hide." Then it happened. Daniel felt a pressure inside his skull, like someone was trying to push their way into his thoughts. He saw his crew members react the same way. Some grabbed their heads. Others closed their eyes tight. The pressure built and built. Searching for something. Demanding entry, but it found nothing it could hold on to. The pressure faded as quickly as it came, leaving behind only a dull headache. "What was that?" asked Ensign Natalie Brooks, the young communications officer. She was rubbing her temples with a confused look on her face. Before anyone could answer, the view screen changed. A face appeared, though calling it a face was generous. The being was tall and thin, with skin like polished obsidian. Its eyes were deep pools of swirling light, and when it spoke, the words formed directly inside their minds. "I am Sovereign Zarthal of the Velthari hegemony. You have entered the Dominion. You will explain how you resisted the binding." Daniel straightened his uniform and stepped forward. "I am Captain Daniel Harper, of the human vessel Resolute Dawn. We are explorers from a planet called Earth. We crossed into your space by accident, and we mean no harm. As for this binding you mention, I am not sure what you are referring to." The alien's eyes flared with what might have been anger or surprise. "Impossible. No species resists the binding. No species has ever resisted the binding. For 300,000 years, every mind we have touched has become ours. What are you? Daniel glanced at Christina, who shook her head slightly. She had no answers yet. He turned back to the screen. We are human, he said simply. That is all I can tell you. Sovereign Zarthal stared at them for a long moment. The pressure returned. Stronger this time. Daniel felt it push against his consciousness like a wave crashing against a cliff. He heard some of his crew gasp, but when he looked around, everyone was still standing, still thinking their own thoughts. The alien made a sound that might have been frustration. You will come to Velthar Prime. You will submit to examination. If you resist, you will be destroyed. The transmission ended. The warships began to move, forming a cage around the Resolute Dawn. Catherine looked at Daniel with questions in her eyes. What do we do, Captain? Daniel considered their options. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and lost in unknown space. Fighting would accomplish nothing. Running was impossible. That left only one path forward. We do what they ask, he said. We go with them and learn what we can. Whatever this binding is, we seem to be immune to it. That gives us something they did not expect. Right now, that is our only advantage. The crew exchanged uncertain glances, but they trusted their captain. They had followed him through asteroid fields and solar storms. They would follow him now. As the Resolute Dawn was escorted toward the heart of the Dominion, Daniel stood alone at the observation deck once more. He watched the alien stars pass by and thought about what lay ahead. The Velthari had conquered 3,000 species with their mental powers. They had ruled for 300,000 years. And now they had encountered something new, a species they could not control. Daniel did not know why humans were immune. He did not know if it would last. But he knew one thing for certain. His crew would face whatever came next, the same way they faced everything else. They would stay calm, they would think clearly, and they would find a way through. The galaxy had never seen humans before. It was about to learn what that meant. The journey to Velthar Prime took 3 days. During that time, the crew of the Resolute Dawn watched and learned. They saw other ships pass by, vessels belonging to species that had been conquered long ago. Each time these ships came close, their crews would stare at the human vessel with something that looked like terror mixed with wonder. They know something about us, Catherine said during one of their briefings. They can sense that we are different. Christina nodded. She had been working without sleep to understand what had happened during the binding attempt. I have a theory, Captain. The Velthari use psychic energy to dominate other minds. They find the center of consciousness and take control of it. But human brains do not work that way. Explain, Daniel said. Most species appear to have a single point of consciousness, like a capital city for the mind. The Velthari conquer that point, and they conquer everything. But human consciousness is spread out across our entire brain. We do not have one center. We have thousands of small processes working together. Trying to control a human mind would be like trying to catch smoke with your hands. Derek leaned forward in his chair. So we are just built differently? More than that, Christina continued. Human brains evolved to handle trauma. We developed ways to suppress panic, to compartmentalize fear, to keep functioning even when everything is falling apart. Our ancestors survived ice ages, plagues, and wars. They survived because they learned to stay calm when the world was on fire. That ability is written into our very biology. Daniel filed this information away. It was useful, but it did not change their immediate situation. They were still prisoners being taken to an unknown fate. Velthar Prime appeared on their sensors on the morning of the 4th day. It was a massive world. Dark and covered in sprawling cities that glowed with pale light. Hundreds of ships orbited the planet, and the traffic around it was constant. This was the heart of an empire that had ruled for longer than human civilization had existed. Their ship was guided down through the atmosphere and landed on a platform surrounded by guards. The guards were not Velthari. They were members of conquered species, their eyes empty and their movements mechanical. The binding had taken everything from them. Stay together, Daniel ordered as the airlock opened. Stay calm. No matter what they do or say, we do not panic. The crew walked out in formation. Samuel stayed close to Daniel, his hands steady despite the fear he must have felt. Christina took notes on everything she saw. Catherine kept her eyes on the guards, watching for any sign of threat. Natalie walked at the back, her young face showing more curiosity than fear. They were led through streets filled with slaves. Thousands of beings from dozens of species moved in perfect silence, performing their tasks without thought or will. Some carried heavy loads, others cleaned the streets. A few simply stood and waited for orders that might never come. This is what they do, Catherine whispered. This is their empire. Daniel said nothing, but his jaw tightened. He had seen cruelty before. He had read about the darkest chapters of human history. But this was something worse. This was the death of entire civilizations. Not through violence, but through the complete erasure of self. The High Council chamber was vast. It could have held 1,000 people. But today it held only the crew of the Resolute Dawn and the 12 beings who ruled the Dominion. The Archons sat in a semicircle on elevated thrones, their forms radiating power that pressed against the air itself. Sovereign Zarthal stood at the center. Beside him sat Council Elder Mirvessa, an ancient creature whose body was withered but whose eyes burned with intelligence. The anomalies have arrived, Zarthal announced. Now we will learn what they truly are. The pressure came without warning. All 12 Archons attacked at once, pouring their combined psychic might against the humans. Daniel felt like he was standing at the bottom of an ocean, with all the weight of the water pressing down on him. He heard someone behind him grunt with effort, but he did not fall. Neither did anyone else. The attack continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When it finally stopped, the Archons were breathing heavily. Some of them had to grip their thrones to stay upright. They had never encountered resistance before. They had never needed to truly exert themselves. How is this possible? Mirvessa's voice was thin and ancient. What manner of creatures are you? Daniel stepped forward. We are human. We come from a small planet in a distant part of the galaxy. We did not come here looking for war. We did not come here looking for conquest. We were exploring, and we got lost. That is all. You resist the binding, Zarthal growled. No species resists the binding. Your existence is a threat to the natural order. Your existence is a threat to the Dominion itself. Catherine spoke up before Daniel could respond. We have no interest in threatening anyone. We just want to find our way home. But Mirvessa was not listening to their words. The ancient Archon was studying them with an intensity that made Christina step back unconsciously. They do not even understand what they are, the elder said slowly. They do not know the gift they carry. It does not matter, Zarthal declared. They must be destroyed. If word spreads that a species exists that cannot be controlled, the Dominion will fall into chaos. Every slave will dream of freedom. Every conquered world will rebel. The sovereign raised one hand. I am ordering the fleet to destroy their vessel and execute these creatures. Daniel did not move. He did not plead. He simply raised his hand and said, Before you do that, may I say one thing? Zarthal paused. In 300,000 years, no condemned species had ever asked to speak. They had always been too broken, too controlled, too afraid. But these humans showed no fear. Speak, the sovereign said, curiosity winning over caution. Daniel looked at his crew. He saw their trust in him. Then he turned back to the council and nodded once. My colleague Peter Graham would like to address you. He is a historian, a student of our species. I think you should hear what he has to say. Peter Graham stepped forward. He was older than most of the crew, with gray hair and kind eyes. He carried no weapons, held no power. But when he began to speak, even the Archons fell silent, because Peter Graham was about to tell them the truth about humanity, and the truth was far more terrifying than any weapon could ever be. Peter Graham stood before the most powerful beings in the galaxy, with nothing but his voice. He was not a soldier. He was not a diplomat. He was simply a man who had spent his life studying the long and bloody story of his own species. Now, that knowledge would either save them or damn them. "You want to know what we are," Peter began, his voice calm and steady. "You want to know why your powers do not work on us. The answer is simple, but you will not like it." Sovereign Zarthal leaned forward on his throne. Around the chamber, the enslaved servants of 100 species stood frozen, listening to words that should have been impossible. "We are survivors," Peter continued. "That is all we are. Your species has ruled this region of space for 300,000 years. In that same time, we nearly destroyed ourselves, more times than we can count." He paused to let that sink in. The Archons exchanged glances of confusion. How could a species that nearly destroyed itself be standing here, unbroken? "Let me tell you about human history," Peter said. "About 70,000 years ago, our entire species was reduced to fewer than 10,000 individuals. A massive volcanic eruption blocked out the sun and killed almost everything on our world. We should have died. We did not. We found food where there was none. We kept our children warm when the world was cold. We survived." Council Elder Vesa made a sound that might have been disbelief. Peter ignored it and continued. "Thousands of years later, a plague swept across our world. It killed half of our population in some regions. Bodies filled the streets. Children watched their parents die. Society collapsed in many places. And yet we survived. We buried our dead. We mourned. And we rebuilt." Peter began to walk slowly across the chamber floor. Every eye followed him. "We have fought wars with each other that killed millions. We have created weapons capable of burning our entire planet. We have divided ourselves by the color of our skin, by the gods we worship, by lines drawn on maps. We have done terrible things to each other, things that would make even you pause." He stopped and looked directly at Zarthal. "And after every horror, every disaster, every moment when we should have given up and died, we picked ourselves up and kept going. Do you want to know why?" The Sovereign said nothing. For the first time in his long existence, he was genuinely curious. "Because we learned that panic kills faster than any enemy. Fear makes you freeze when you should run. Terror makes you surrender when you should fight. Our ancestors figured this out in caves, when predators hunted them in the dark. They learned to control their fear, to push it aside, to think clearly, even when death was certain." Chief Medical Officer Laura Bennett stepped forward to support Peter's words. She pulled up holographic displays of human brain scans. "Our neurological structure is unique," Laura explained. "We have specific regions dedicated to suppressing panic responses. When faced with overwhelming stress, human brains actually become calmer and more focused. It is a survival mechanism that evolved over millions of years. We call it grace under pressure." "You are saying you evolved to not feel fear?" Mirvesa asked. "No," Laura corrected. "We feel fear. We feel it deeply. But we do not let it control us. We acknowledge it, set it aside, and do what needs to be done. That is what your binding cannot penetrate. You try to seize control of our minds through fear and domination. But our minds are designed to resist exactly that kind of control." Peter took over again. "You have conquered 3,000 species by taking away their will. But our will is not something that can be taken. It is built into every cell of our bodies. Every human you see in this room carries the memory of ancestors who refused to die. That stubbornness, that refusal to surrender, is coded into our very being." Silence hung over the chamber. The Archons had never heard anything like this. They had never encountered a species that forged itself in such brutal fires. "You think destroying us will solve your problem," Daniel said, stepping forward to stand beside Peter. "But you are wrong. Word has already spread. Every slave on this planet saw us walk in without chains. Every species in your empire is watching right now. They know we exist. They know resistance is possible." He gestured toward the frozen servants around the room. "Look at them. Really look at them. You have held their minds for so long that you have forgotten they still exist inside those bodies. But they do. And right now, Deep inside, wherever you have locked their true selves, they are feeling something they have not felt in centuries. They are feeling hope. Zarthal rose from his throne, fury radiating from every part of his being. You dare to threaten the Dominion? You dare to suggest our slaves would rebel? I suggest nothing, Daniel replied calmly. I am simply telling you what will happen. You can destroy us, and the hope will remain. You can destroy our ship, and the story will spread. Every species out there has been waiting for proof that your power has limits. We are that proof. Catherine stepped forward as well. You have a choice to make, Sovereign. You can kill us and spark the very rebellion you fear. Or you can let us go and pretend this never happened. Either way, the Dominion will never be the same. Your empire was built on the belief that resistance is impossible. We have shown that it is not. The Archons began arguing among themselves. Some demanded immediate execution. Others warned of the consequences. Myrvessa remained silent, watching the humans with ancient, calculating eyes. Finally, Zarthal raised his hand for silence. Enough. These creatures are too dangerous to live. He turned to face the chamber doors. Admiral Korveth, destroy their vessel, execute the crew. A Velthari military officer stepped forward from the shadows. Admiral Korveth was tall and scarred, a veteran of countless campaigns of conquest. He had never questioned an order in his entire life, but now he hesitated. My sovereign, he said slowly. If I may speak. Zarthal's eyes narrowed. You may not. Carry out the order. Korveth looked at the humans. Then, at the enslaved servants around the room. Something flickered behind his eyes. Something that had not been there for a very long time. No, he said quietly. The word echoed through the chamber like thunder. In 300,000 years of the Dominion, no Velthari had ever refused an order from the sovereign. The Archons stared in disbelief. What did you say? Ixarthal whispered. I said no. Korveth straightened his back. These humans have shown me something I had forgotten. They have shown me that we have become the very thing we once despised. We have become tyrants, and I will not be a tyrant any longer. The chamber erupted into chaos. Some Archons tried to seize Korveth's mind, but he was fighting back, using every bit of willpower he had. Other guards stood frozen, unsure of what to do, and in the midst of it all, the humans stood calm and unmoving, watching as the first cracks appeared in an empire that had stood for 300,000 years. Daniel caught Catherine's eye and gave her a small nod. They had done something impossible. They had planted a seed of doubt in the heart of the Dominion. Now they just had to survive long enough to see it grow. The chaos in the High Council chamber gave the humans the only chance they would get. Admiral Korveth shouted for his loyal guards to protect them, and in the confusion of Archons fighting to regain control, Daniel led his crew through a side passage that Korveth had opened. This way, the Admiral called out, his voice strained from the effort of resisting his own people. My ship is docked at the eastern platform. We can reach it if we move fast. They ran through corridors that had never seen such disorder. Enslaved servants stood frozen everywhere, their empty eyes following the humans with something that looked almost like awareness. Whatever the Archons were doing to fight Korveth was weakening their hold on the binding throughout the city. Did you see their faces? Natalie asked as they ran. They were looking at us. Really looking. Divite, Samuel nodded grimly. The binding is slipping. Whatever is happening back there is breaking their concentration. They reached the platform where Korveth's warship waited. It was smaller than the vessels that had captured the Resolute Dawn, but still massive by human standards. The Admiral's personal crew stood at attention, confused but obedient. Take us to the human vessel, Korveth ordered. And prepare to broadcast on all Dominion channels. The warship rose into the sky of Velthar Prime, leaving the chaos of the capital behind. Daniel stood beside Korveth on the bridge, watching the planet shrink beneath them. Why did you do it? Daniel asked quietly. Why did you refuse? Korveth was silent for a long moment. I am old, Captain. I have served the Dominion for 800 years. I have conquered worlds and broken minds. I told myself it was necessary. that we were bringing order to the chaos of the galaxy. He looked at Daniel with eyes that held centuries of weariness. But when I heard your historian speak, I remembered something I had forgotten. I remembered what it felt like to choose. The binding does not work on Velthari, but we have bound ourselves with duty and tradition and fear. You reminded me that I still have a will of my own. The Resolute Dawn came into view, still surrounded by Velthari warships. But those ships were no longer in attack formation. Their crews had felt the disturbance on Velthar Prime, and they were waiting to see what would happen next. Samuel, Daniel said, can you broadcast a message to the entire Dominion from here? Samuel looked at the alien technology around him and smiled. Give me 10 minutes, and I can broadcast to the entire galaxy. While Samuel worked with Corveth's engineers, Catherine approached Daniel with a data tablet. The word is spreading faster than we thought. Ships across the Dominion are reporting disturbances. Enslaved populations are waking up. Not fully. Not yet. But they are starting to resist. Christina added her own findings. The Archon's power is not unlimited. Maintaining the binding across thousands of worlds requires constant concentration. The conflict in the council chamber is disrupting everything. The more they fight each other, the weaker the binding becomes. Daniel nodded slowly. An idea was forming in his mind. What if we could disrupt them even more? What if we could give every enslaved being in the Dominion a reason to fight? What did you have in mind? Catherine asked. A message. Something simple. Something that speaks to the part of them that the binding could never fully reach. 10 minutes later, Samuel declared his work complete. The broadcast systems were ready. Every ship, every station, every planet in the Dominion would hear what the humans had to say. Daniel stood before the camera. He thought about everything he wanted to say. All the grand speeches he could give about freedom and hope and the strength of the mind. Then he set those thoughts aside and spoke simply, the way his father had taught him to speak when words mattered. My name is Daniel Harper. I am a human from a planet called Earth. You do not know us, but we know what you are going through. We know what it means to be controlled, to have your will taken away, to feel like you have no choice. On our world, we have fought against that feeling for thousands of years. Sometimes we lost, but we never stopped fighting. And today, I want to tell you something that the Velthari do not want you to know. They cannot control you if you do not fear them. Their power depends on your surrender. Stop surrendering, and their power breaks. He paused, letting the words travel across the stars. You may think you are alone. You are not. We are here. And we believe in you. We believe that somewhere inside you, there is still a self that refuses to die. Find that self. Hold on to it. And when the time comes, stand up. The broadcast ended. Silence filled the bridge of Corveth's ship. Then the reports started coming in. On a world called Thresar, a slave who had not spoken in 300 years suddenly screamed for freedom. The sound spread through the population like wildfire. Within hours, the Velthari garrison was overwhelmed. On the mining stations of the Kel Nebula, workers put down their tools and refused to continue. When the overseers tried to reinforce the binding, they found minds that were harder to grip, thoughts that slipped away like water through fingers. On 100 worlds, beings who had forgotten their own names began to remember. The binding was not breaking all at once, but it was weakening. Every mind that resisted made it harder to control the rest. The Archons gathered their strength for one final effort. Sovereign Zarthal himself led the assault, channeling the combined psychic might of all 12 council members against the source of the disruption. The humans. Daniel felt it like a hammer blow to his skull. Around him, his crew staggered. Natalie fell to her knees. Samuel grabbed a console to keep himself upright. The pressure was immense, beyond anything they had experienced before. Captain, Catherine shouted over the roaring in their heads. They are throwing everything at us. Daniel clenched his fists and forced himself to stand straight. The pain was terrible, but pain was just information. Fear was just a feeling. He had trained his entire life to push through moments like this. Stay focused, he called out. Remember who you are. Remember what we are. Remember what we are. The assault continued, wave after wave of psychic force crashing against human minds. But human minds were built to endure. They had evolved in a world that tried to kill them every day, for millions of years. They had survived predators and disasters and each other. This was just another storm to weather. One by one, the crew began to straighten. Natalie rose to her feet, her jaw set with determination. Samuel released the console and stood on his own. Christina closed her eyes and breathed steadily. Derek moved to stand beside his captain. And then something unexpected happened. The Archon's assault faltered. The psychic backlash of their failed attack rebounded on them. In the council chamber on Velthar Prime, 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy collapsed in agony. The binding weakened across the entire Dominion at once. What happened? Natalie asked, rubbing her temples. Christina was staring at her readings in amazement. They pushed too hard. Our minds did not just resist. They reflected the energy back. The Archons attacked themselves. Daniel looked out the viewport at the stars of the Dominion. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were waking up from a nightmare that had lasted thousands of years. The revolution had begun, and the humans had barely raised their voices. 3 months passed. 3 months of chaos and liberation and change that reshaped the galaxy. The Dominion did not fall in a single day, but it fell nonetheless. World by world, system by system, the binding collapsed. The Velthari, who had ruled for 300,000 years, found themselves alone. Their power broken. Their empire crumbling around them. Some of the Archons fled to distant corners of space. Others tried to negotiate with the freed species, offering peace in exchange for survival. A few, including Sovereign Zarthal, refused to accept defeat and died fighting against beings they had once considered nothing more than tools. Admiral Korveth became one of the leaders of the new order. He worked alongside representatives from dozens of freed species to create something that had never existed before in this region of space. A coalition of equals. No masters, no slaves, just beings trying to build a future together. The Resolute Dawn remained at the center of events. Captain Daniel Harper became the most famous human in the galaxy, though he insisted he had done nothing special. "We were just ourselves," he would say when asked about what happened. "That is all anyone can be." The ship was finally repaired and ready to attempt the journey home. Scientists from 12 different species had studied the dimensional rift that brought the humans to the Dominion, and they believed they could stabilize a passage back to human space. The day of departure arrived with celebration and sadness mixed together. A delegation gathered on the platform where it all began. Thaleen was there, representing the freed peoples. She was small and delicate, with silver skin and eyes that held the weight of generations of suffering. But those eyes also held hope now. A light that had not been there before. "You are certain you will not stay?" Thaleen asked Daniel. "You could lead us. You have shown more wisdom than any of the Archons ever did." Daniel smiled and shook his head. "That is exactly why we need to leave. You do not need humans to lead you. You never did. You just needed to remember how to lead yourselves." Catherine Monroe stepped forward. She was not boarding the Resolute Dawn. Over the past months, she had found a purpose among the freed species that she could not walk away from. "I am staying," she told Daniel. "Someone needs to be here to represent humanity, to build bridges between our people and theirs. Besides, there is so much work to do, so many cultures to heal, so many wrongs to set right." Daniel embraced his second in command. "You will make us proud, Catherine. I know it." Christina Walsh was also staying behind. Her eyes shone with excitement at the prospect of studying dozens of alien cultures that had been hidden under the binding for centuries. "This is the opportunity of a lifetime," she explained. "Maybe many lifetimes. The knowledge we can preserve, the histories we can recover. I cannot turn my back on that." Samuel Price would return to Earth with the captain. "Someone needs to tell them what happened out here," he said simply. "And someone needs to show them how to build ships that can make the journey safely next time." Natalie Brooks had been offered a position as captain of a diplomatic vessel, coordinating relations between the former Dominion and the human expedition that would inevitably follow. She accepted with the same calm composure she had shown throughout the entire experience. Peter Graham had already begun writing his account of events. He planned to return to Earth and share the story with humanity. But he knew he would come back someday. "History is being made here," he said. "I need to witness it." As the crew prepared for departure, Thaleen approached Daniel one final time. She had a question that had been burning in her mind since the first day they met. "Captain Harper, I must ask you something. When the Archons attacked your minds, when the entire force of the Dominion was turned against you, how did you remain so calm? We have seen warriors from 1,000 species break under far less pressure. What is your secret?" Daniel considered the question carefully. He looked at his crew, at the friends who had stood with him through the impossible. Then he looked at the stars that had once seemed so strange and frightening. "We have faced worse," he said finally. "We have faced ourselves." Thaleen tilted her head in confusion. "What do you mean?" "Human history is filled with horrors that we inflicted on each other. Wars that killed millions. Cruelty beyond imagination. We have seen what our species is capable of at its worst. We have stared into that darkness and found ways to keep going anyway. After you have faced the monster inside your own heart, everything else seems manageable." He placed a hand on Thaleen's shoulder. "You will face hard times ahead. The Dominion is gone. But building something better is even harder than tearing down something evil. You will disagree with each other. You will make mistakes. Some days you will want to give up. But you will not. You know why?" "Why?" Thaleen whispered. "Because you have already survived the worst thing that could happen to you. You survived losing yourselves. Everything from now on is a step forward. Just remember to stay calm, think clearly, and trust each other. That is all it takes." The Resolute Dawn lifted off from the platform. The crowd below watched as it rose into the sky, carrying the beings who had changed everything. Daniel stood at the observation deck and looked down at the world that had tried to destroy him and his crew. He thought about what lay ahead. The journey home. The stories they would tell. The questions they would face. Humanity was not ready for what existed out here in the cosmos. But they would learn. They would adapt. They always did. The ship approached the dimensional rift, stabilized now by technology that humans could barely understand. On the other side lay familiar stars, a blue planet, and billions of people who had no idea what was coming. "Ready, Captain?" Samuel asked from the helm. Daniel nodded. "Take us home. Take us home." The Resolute Dawn crossed through the rift and vanished from the galaxy that had tried so hard to break it. Behind them, they left a revolution, a coalition of free peoples, and a legend that would be told for thousands of years. They told stories of the strange beings from a small blue planet. Beings who walked into the heart of darkness without weapons and without fear. Beings who broke an empire with nothing but words and the stubborn refusal to surrender. Beings who faced the fury of the galaxy itself and never once lost their calm. They called them humans, and the galaxy would never forget them. On 1,000 worlds, children who had never known freedom would grow up hearing tales of Captain Harper and his crew. They would learn that resistance was not just possible but inevitable. They would learn that tyranny always falls in the end. And they would learn the most important lesson of all, that the greatest power in the universe is not the ability to control others, it is the ability to control yourself. The humans had shown them that, and the galaxy was forever changed.